Time for the regular meeting of the Howell Township Board of Education to come to order. As soon as I get my roll, shall we have a roll call, please? Mr. Garvin? Present. Dr. Love? Anybody here from Dr. Love? Please, she's expected. Mrs. Mallett? Here. Mrs. Mangano? Here. Mr. Miller? Here. Mrs. Okerson should be walking in the door any minute. She was stuck in traffic. Mr. Thorpe? Here. Mr. Bongiovanni? Present. Mr. O'Brien? Here. A quorum is present. Please rise to salute the flag and then remain standing for a rendition of the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Share?
Yeah, we should set somewhat down. Ready? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through those perilous fights. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's bright glare, my voice cracks, almost bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. Hang on. We have a certificate for one of you, the last minute volunteer. We don't have a certificate for it.
We will make sure we get one, right,
Mr. Preston, would you?
So which do we have? What was your name? Annette. Okay, so Annette, and you're from Ramtown, Annette? So we have our certificate. Do we want to have a, yeah, what is that?
Why don't Mr. O'Brien and Ms. Malley hand out the certificates? Come on.
You did a fantastic job. So, sir, thank you. And you get your
Maybe Ms. Malley can introduce the other.
Yeah, so go back.
What's the other young lady's name?
So that was a warm-up.
This other young lady is Jean O'Malley. She's also from Ramtown. I think they convinced each other to do it together.
It's always better together. Everybody see. All right, let's do it again. Thank you. Thank you. You did well.
Jeanne.
Announcement by the President as read by the Secretary. Adequate notice of this meeting as required by Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, were distributed by the Secretary on March 20th, 2018. It is now time for the Superintendent and Board President's remarks.
Yes.
Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Isola, Board President, Mr. O'Brien.
Thanks, if you don't mind, Mr. Isola. I've asked the regular order be open tonight so we can have executive conducted at the end of the meeting. We have a pretty exciting agenda tonight. Tonight, we're very fortunate. We have some leaders among with us tonight, members of our student body who have been selected to participate in our Board of Education Day. I'll let Mr. Isola talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Before that, though, let me just briefly bring you up to speed on some of the things that have been happening that I feel really require some notice. Our advocacy committee, led by Mr. Gurman, has notified us, and we'll be talking about their efforts to address the issue of frequency of testing for standardized assessments, and I'm sure you'll give us a little more flavor on that as you go forward. But by reducing the amount of times that we have to test, I believe will be helpful to our educational mandate. So we thank advocacy for making that a key issue they're going to be focusing on, as well as on the question of safety and utilizing certain modifications to some of our policies about fire alarms. So look forward to hearing about that. We also will hear more from our finance chair. They met last night to develop a tentative budget. Tentative budget needs to go to the county. The final budget will be held, and hearings will be held in the very near future. But we have some very, very positive developments there, which I'm very, very proud to report results in a total expenditure of less than 1% for our district in this coming year, when you include both the levy and debt service. So in that budget, there are things that we have developed and built, such as security, the HVAC through the ESIP climate control, which is budget neutral, but going to establish parity in terms of a cool, welcoming environment in classrooms across our district. We also have been, since we adopted a 5-year strategic planning model that aligns with our long-term strategic plan, been very successful in using existing reserves, and that capability has helped us to weather many a storm without having to impact the taxpayer. And finally, we are going to be talking, and I believe we have an idea on the table to have Mr. Bongiovanni work with Dr. Lowe to see some of the demonstrations of students in action, which I've asked Mr. Bongiovanni to spearhead and work cooperatively with education to see if we can, have as a board here at the meetings opportunities to see how our students are excelling and demonstrating excellence. So a lot to talk about tonight, but I will turn it over to Mr. Isola to continue and talk a little bit about the Board of Education. But before I do that, there's one other item that I wanted to mention. Recently, there was a post about the school calendar, which came out and was the subject of quite a bit of discussion over the last couple of days. The calendar is a process that I would like the superintendent to maybe frame out how it is developed, the history of it, especially for board members with varying tenures. It's good to know. There are a lot of stakeholders that have not yet been consulted, and the process is unfolding. The final calendar will not be presented to this board until a future date. Mr. Isola, when is that date that you're going to bring it to the board?
The board should have it on its April agenda.
Right. So, while there may be concerns about that, at the end of the day, this has been a thoughtful process where the superintendent goes into a lot of hard work to seek input from a lot of stakeholders, and unfortunately that process got short-circuited this time around. So I would like to ask the superintendent during his remarks to include an overview of that so we can look forward to what he represents and presents to us in the future meeting. With that, Mr. Isola.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming out on a makeup day. Right? We had a snow day Wednesday, and we find ourselves here on Wednesday because of some requirements on submitting our tentative budget. And I thank everyone for their willingness to give time on a Friday evening, and certainly doing some important work like celebrating our Student Board of Education Day, our second annual Student Board of Education Day. And I always look at Ms. Malley because it was from her day at seed a year ago that the seeds were thrown. And as I have said on a few occasions, we kind of watered it, nurtured it, and had a beautiful day last year with 15 of our 5th grade students. And tonight is one of the enhancements that we've made to that program because we continue to be reflective leaders and board members and educators, and we want to continue to make strive towards greatness, right? Good is okay, but we want to be great. So when we take a look at the program that existed last year, which was absolutely a home run for a year one project in that short amount of time. So kudos to all of you for supporting that program and for the folks out at the buildings for making sure the program was successful. But this year, what we wanted to do was have the students out to the board meeting prior to the actual Student Board of Education Day, so they can actually see what the dais looks like and how the board conducts its business, so that when they're sitting behind the dais in just about a month from now, it won't be so foreign to them. So we're really excited to have some of our fine fifth graders here this evening from all the schools. And at this time, I'll ask Mr. Harvey, I don't see where the mic is, there he is. I'll ask Mr. Harvey to come up to the podium, which he'll wheel over to the microphone, and introduce and present each of our winners, their position on the dais for next month. And I think they have some really cool things to give you. And Mike, why don't you first frame where we are tonight, and then we'll meet some of these fine young individuals.
Okay, good evening. We're excited to introduce tonight this year's students who will be participating in Howell Township Public Schools' second annual Student Board of Education Day. This day will recognize the hard work and dedication of the members of the Board of Education and allow students to experience the important role each member plays in the education of our students. On April 18th, these fifth grade students will serve as members of the Board of Education, attend committee meetings, and learn about the responsibilities members of the board assume in the operation of our schools. In preparation for the event, the selected students are here tonight to be recognized and experience a regularly scheduled board meeting. A total of 15 students, 3 from each 3 to 5 school, were selected based on the content of their response to a writing prompt. This year's prompt was, if you were to serve as a member of the Howell Township Board of Education, what policies would you implement and support in order to promote a positive learning environment for all students? Teachers distributed and collected the completed essays during the month of February and worked as a team to select 3 students from each school. In order to assist in support of this event, members of the board visited each 3 to 5 school and briefly met with 5th grade students to help promote this civics-related event. We would now like to introduce this year's Board of Education Day participants. Okay, for superintendent, we have Julianne LaCicero from Ramtown School. Assistant superintendent for we're going to start here because we'll be sworn in after we receive our assignments.
Mr. Isola, would it be right, I think, since we have the progenitor of the program here, Ms. Malley and Mr. Bongiovanni, Vice President, join them up there?
Please, sir.
If you would, sir.
They're in their folder. Their IDs are in their folder.
Yeah, so one of the board members, if Ms. Malley and Ms. Bongiovanni could.
It's still their ID.
Help out a little bit. There you go.
Oh, they're already in the envelope. Right.
I think they'll find that pretty cool.
Okay, we have Eric Prey, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, and will also serve on the Education Committee from Newberry School. Isabella Anzavino, Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Services, will serve on the Policy Committee and is from Ardena School. Sophie Tonino, Assistant Superintendent and Board Secretary, will serve on the Operations Committee from Ramtown School. Vincent Agnello will serve as the Director of Digital Learning and Innovation, will serve on the Committee for Education, and is from Newberry School, has another event this evening, so we'll make sure. Henry Kreminski, Board President, will serve on the Policy Committee and is from Ardena School. Okay, Sophia Gallo will serve as Board Vice President will serve on the Safety and Advocacy Committee and is from Memorial School. Okay, Emma Pierzanowski will serve as board attorney and on the operations committee and is from Ramtown School. Alexander Madpak, board member, will serve on the policy committee and is from Ardena School. Landon Fulcher will serve as a board member and a member of the education committee and is from Memorial School. Veronica Tarkowski is a board member and will serve on the education committee and is from Aldrich School. Imani Annaville will serve as a board member and also a member of the policy committee and is from Memorial School. Violet Parker is a board member who will also serve on the Safety and Advocacy Committee and is from Newberry School but is not able to attend tonight for another school event. Colin Spires will serve as a board member and a member of the Operations Committee and is from Aldrich School. Devin Campanella is a board member and will serve on the Safety and Advocacy Committee and is from Aldrich School. Congratulations to all our Student Board of Education members. We enjoyed reading your essays, and now Mr. Sanasek will...
Why don't we bring him in the end? Let's come on up here.
Get the art study class today.
Come on in.
Come on.
Come on over, board members.
Move this out of the way for pictures.
I
Okay.
don't think everyone wants to take pictures here.
Okay. One of the things we get to do is to swear in new board members every year. It's a privilege and an honor for us to do that, but it's also to certify that you're all eligible, and you're all eligible. So raise your right hand. Yes.
Who is our business administrator? Who is
This young
our,
lady right here.
why don't you stand next to Mr. Sanisak?
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to tell them, when they get to the blank, they should fill in their own name. Okay, tell them that. Okay. Raise your right hand and repeat after us. So I state your name. Tell them what it says.
Do solemnly swear to affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
So say that much.
Solemnly swear to affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
And the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
And that I will respect and obey federal, state,
And that I will respect and obey federal, state,
and local laws and stay informed of the issues affecting my school community.
and local laws and stay informed of the issues affecting my school and community.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I
I
state your name.
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will learn and respect the civic responsibilities required of being a student member of the Board of Education.
Do solemnly swear that I will learn and I will respect the civic abilities required of being a student and member of the Board of Education.
Respect the rights,
Respect the rights,
beliefs, and opinions of others.
beliefs, and opinions of others,
And participate in the
faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of student board of education member according to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
You are all sworn in as members. Fill in your name, sign it. When we take a break, Miss George, raise your hand. Give it to Miss George for our records, and she will give you a new copy on nicer paper for you to take home and fill out to keep. Okay? So, I think Miss...
Yeah, was all the board like to be part of the...
Yes, let's get the board up,
Great.
the two boards together.
And then when is Ms. Grant? And we'll just put in, the two Blueberry students that could be with us. And Ms. Callahan.
That's good.
So list their names.
Mr. Harvey.
Welcome.
Ron, where's the superintendent? Julia.
Is that our superintendent?
It is.
You got the easy job.
Administrator, make sure you're all right there.
Whoa. Hide your wallet.
Sure.
We'll stay in it,
Can you
right?
get us all in?
I don't know, I'm not sure.
There you go. All right.
Stay in it. Feel free to come on up and...
Come on up, parents.
8 by 10s in the lobby later on.
All right, everybody good?
All right.
Over here. One more right up front. All right, congratulations, everybody. I'll just say what
Well, I was very impressed already with the performance of the business administrator administering the oath there. So I think very excited, looking forward to working with our fellow board members.
Whoa.
That was Miller who said that, not me.
I'm getting replaced.
Yes, Ms. Maxwell.
So I just want to also re-emphasize, Newbury has a student-faculty game tonight, unfortunately, or fortunately, it's great stuff, but conflict because of the weather. We will go out to Newbury and we'll swear them in, the two participants, so they'll go through the same process so they get to see how that works, and we'll make sure they have a copy of their affidavit there that gives them the jurisdiction to serve as a student board of education member, okay? So we want to make sure that everyone was aware that we will get out to Newbury for those two individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. That's great. All right, sir, so you can...
I'm going to, if it's the board's pleasure at this point, I'll continue on with our updates and our information for our March meeting. So, as you know, unfortunately, there was yet another act of violence at a school in Maryland this past week, and this remains a hyper-focus for schools across our country. And we continue to work diligently with our partners in law enforcement, members of this board, and I'm really proud to say that we'll be putting forth a safety and security task force to evaluate and review our protocols and procedures. While we believe, both Chief Kudrick and I believe, that we have really good methods in place here and that our schools are very safe, we must continue to move forward and work in that venue to continue to make sure that schools are as safe as possible and that kids feel comfortable in schools, because that's what is important, and that their learning environments are in place for them. So I'm really proud of the work that's happening across the district. Last week, across the district, we had some walk-ins, we had some 17 acts of kindness, we had different representations of support for safe schools and for the victims of at that time, Florida. Just want to let the board know that this continues. We know that in April, there's a second conversation that's a national day of demonstration, and we're watching that closely, and conversations specifically in the middle schools are ongoing to make sure that we continue to support that environment in the most respectful way for students, and in a way that is not, to be anything other than supporting safe school environments, and not a political statement one side or the other. It's a complex conversation, and that's what makes America great, that we have divergent conversations or beliefs, and when we work together, we come out to a good solution. So that's an ongoing dialogue, and I don't expect it to go away anytime soon. So we will continue to keep the board and the different committees, certainly operations through Miss Malley, where safety sits, updated on the progress there. The next thing on my update is the school calendar. Well, the school, let's do one thing at a time here. School calendar, current 17-18, is in need of amendment due to the abundance of snow days, unfortunately. And I just want to be really clear with the board and with the folks that are here tonight, and our students that are here tonight. Our calendar is clear that we add days back beyond 2 to the last week in June, and then if it goes beyond that, we start working on spring break. And I'm really hoping that we're past any kind of winter storm. We'll see what, it could be power out, it could be any emergency closing could happen for various reasons, right? But I'm hoping that the winter component of that conversation has passed, and we're in a much more stable weather pattern, although somebody recently said Sunday looks interesting, so we'll get on our weather channel and we'll take a look at that. So we are in need of we're not in need of an amendment for the calendar, because the calendar is established to do that, but currently we are looking, and this is even hard for me to say because I know people have plans, and staff is working so hard all year, and the last week of June comes, and many of them are thinking about, catching their breath and getting away with their kids or their family or their friends. And right now we're looking at June 27th as our last day, which is the Wednesday. This current calendar has 2 snow days built in. We absorbed them, and we are now had 5 closures. And for those that dare to criticize our decision, well, let me be clear, my decision making, where's my superintendent friend? Come sit with me. She closed the school. Usually we get them to scapegoat for a lot, but we also get to do great things. So if anyone was concerned, there was a story going around that a superintendent shared in his community. Better to be a fool 50 times than fatally wrong once. And some of the response when I sent my message out to staff, some of the response, and there was quite a few of them, was, never apologize for trying to keep us safe. But I get that it stinks, right? We want to go on summer break. So we're grappling with that from an emotional point of view, from a school point of view, but we'll continue to think creatively on how to do things in a way that is addresses those concerns. As we look back, and I'm gathering that data now, because when we switch and we toggle now to the 18-19 school calendar, and I'll go through that process briefly. I'm going back to look at historical data of the number of closures we have experienced over the last 10 years. So I can get an average of what that means. We had Sandy, I think that was 7 or 9 days that year. That was a big year. So we've had circumstances that were unique, but what's the weather pattern been? And there's really no predictability, right? Because we can have a mild winter or a bad winter. We can have power outages, we can have hurricanes. So it's really something that is always fluid, and you know, it's a guess. But you want to build a calendar that's respectful to time, so that if you have a few of them, you can deal with that within the calendar. But if you have a tough season, you have to have opportunities to address those closures that become necessary, whether it's inclement weather or some other reasons. I go through a process of developing the calendar, and let me be perfectly clear to everyone in this room and listening on national television around the world, the calendar is designed by the superintendent and his team. It is not negotiable. However, this superintendent and my predecessor has entered into a practice over a long period of time to share the calendar in advance with stakeholders. My job is to create a calendar that meets the educational objectives of our students and staff and provides an opportunity for us to conduct school in a way that is appropriate and meaningful. That is the objective of the calendar. At a minimum, 180 days for students, and our collective bargaining agreement with the association, the Teachers Association, calls for 187 days of employment for our staff. So we find ourselves grappling between those two numbers. So let me just backload some information. Current year, 2 snow days built in. We built a calendar that had 182 days for our students and 187 days for our staff. The first snow came, Mr. Isola in all his wisdom said we're going to close school. We now are going to school for 181 days for students and 186 for staff. This board has never entered into the practice, nor has it been the superintendent's recommendation to have staff make that day up. Because I know on that day they were checking, I live with 2 teachers. I can't tell you how many papers they graded over the last 2 days. So they're all working. We have amazing teachers in this district that take advantage of those times. Sure, do they go out and build a snowman with their families? I hope they do. Do they stay safe? Do they make soup and cookies? I hope they do. But trust me, they take advantage of that time. So we're in a very good position with our fine staff, both from the administration team and the teacher team and the related services teams. So second snow day comes, we're now at 180 days for students, right? And 185 for staff, and that's okay, that was built in. Third day comes, we now tick below the legal limit of 180, we have 179 days, that becomes a makeup, okay? So, my practice, following my predecessors, has been to share the calendar with stakeholders. So who are the key stakeholders? Every board member gets a copy of the calendar in advance. Every PTA and PTO president gets the calendar in advance. The academic council of the HTEA and HTAC, those are the 2 collective units on the property. Those are the teacher association, which is wall to wall. It covers our custodial staff, our food service staff, our transportation staff, and our educational staff. In addition to that, the HTAC, that's the administrative council, that's our supervisors, our principals, our vice principals. Their leadership group gets it and often distributes, both of those units basically distribute it out. So that every stakeholder has an opportunity, board, parent, and staff. I collect feedback from those individuals. I understand them up to 70 comments from the staff. I haven't gotten them yet from Ms. Muha, our chair of academic council, but last year I had a similar number. I answered each and every question that was presented, each and every one. Typed, answered. Some of them are, hey, it doesn't line up with my hometown. It's not how I develop a calendar. I feel for you, but it's not how I develop a calendar. Other was very good suggestions and things of that nature. The calendar that ended up on Facebook, I think, is what I've heard. Try not to do Facebook. Is a calendar that I presented for feedback that is a deviation from a regular practice. But let me be clear one more time. 180 minimum, 187 starting point. If we have some flexibility there because of snow, we live with that. So whether we start students on the 7th, 6th, or the 12th, it's still 180 days. The end of the calendar doesn't change. It's just a matter of when between those dates do we start and finish. So it's simple math, but when you're jockeying days around, it gets a little confusing sometimes for individuals who don't grapple with this all the time. They don't at all mean that disrespectfully. So One of the things we talked about in recent years, we've gone to 3 days up front. And I'll explain the philosophy for 3 days that has been supported widely by staff, is my understanding, because it gives them enough time to greet kids with a readiness. We generally do a building-based day, so the teachers come in, they get their schedules, they get their room set up, they get basic readiness. Teachers deserve that time so that they can greet kids prepared for school. We then do a day of professional learning communities within the schools so that grade bands can meet and they can collaborate about launching the school year and what that looks like for each of the grade levels or each of the school panels. And they work collaboratively as a school to get their culture and their readiness prepared beyond making sure there's enough books for every kid, the computers are ready, beyond that. That's one of the first days I spoke about. The second day is more about the professional readiness. The third day is generally district environments that we want to talk about. For example, we're going to be launching a new website, as you all know. There's some training that we want to do with staff around that because it can be used for communication with our parents. So we want to train staff on what that looks like and how that vehicle could strengthen the school-home relationship, and we think that's important. We'll take a look at our teacher evaluation program, something very important to both staff and administration. And we'll do training around that. We're currently looking at toggling from one of Marzano's models to a newer model that we think will be received well, and the initial feedback has been positive on that. So there would be training involved with that. So that third day gives us an opportunity to prepare staff for what the environments that they're going to be asked to live in throughout that year look like. So that's why the 3 days have been successful over the last 3 or 4 years we've been doing that. But this year, that would only leave us with a Friday, because Labor Day is the Monday. If we do 3 days, that gives us the Friday, which would normally be okay, with the exception of the school calendar calls for a closure on the, help me with the date, the Monday and the Tuesday. If you could pull the calendar up, that'd be helpful. What was that? The 10th and the 11th, correct. Monday the 10th and Monday the 11th calls for a school closure, not in observation of Rosh Hashanah, but because public schools, we don't observe any religious holiday. We determine that our community may want to observe, and therefore, by holding school, we can have staff members who are observing religious holidays not present. We can have students and family who feel that being home is more important on that day, and if that's their religious belief, we respect that. But it's not for the observation, it's to conduct a meaningful day of school and not have students or staff in an awkward, uncomfortable situation if they're called to come to work and it's a day of their religious obligations. So, the calendar's always been respectful to that. So if we have the 1 day Friday, then we're off for 2 days, and now students come back on the 12th. Kind of a lost day for students was the conversation that we were having, and looking to make kids hit the ground and stay in routines we thought would be beneficial. We recognize the 12th is a later start than probably ever, barring some kind of emergency up front. Sometimes things have probably happened a long time ago. But to start the 12th, we recognize would be late. Hence, the sharing of the calendar for feedback. I have not received but one direct feedback. Not one. I'm sorry, one. Let me stand corrected. A couple of members at the dais spoke to me individually in an email or telephone conversation. But from staff or community, I have one request for clarification on something. That's because the period that I've asked for is about a 2-week period. I think it's the 28th that I asked for all my feedback. So the Teachers Association and the administrators, they gather it and they collect it, so they give it to me at once. So I know through my conversations and partnership with the fine folks that work in both of those units that there are some questions and concerns that I will have to look at and consider. So, with that said, I will be looking at that information that I received on next week, and once I gather all that information, sit and reflect upon that, I then may tweak the calendar to look differently. I may say, well, this calendar outweighs that concern, or this concern isn't really relevant to the Howell Township public school system. And we'll look at all those, but I will look at every single one of those comments, as I pride myself on doing. And then I will present to this board as part of my recommendations, a calendar for approval in the April meeting. And that is typical of the process. So I apologize for the long-winded explanation, but the President did ask me to explain the process
Yes.
thoroughly, and I wanted to do that.
So thank you. And Mr. Isola, first of all, let's clarify, at the end of the day, construction of the calendar is your responsibility, what you do.
Correct.
I appreciate the fact that our district has, through your predecessor, and you continued it, a process of engagement with key stakeholders that have been identified as critical for feedback. And I want to applaud you for that because it is a level of inclusion that not all districts provide to their community. So again, Howell leads in terms of community interaction by having that outreach to designated stakeholders like the PTA, PTO, our staff. And in this particular case, the reason we're having this conversation now is that process, that thoughtful process was short-circuited by a jump to social media. At the end of the day, I do not believe that it is the intent or desire of this board to change our policy, which is that we ask that you develop a calendar that best serves the children's educational needs. And that's where we leave it, because at the end of the day, the rest is up to you. So the fact that you're engaged in this process, we look forward to seeing your recommendations at the appropriate time. And we also appreciate the fact that you have a history of looking for feedback both from this board and other stakeholders, and that will continue to be part of the process. So thank you. And I appreciate the explanation for those who may not have heard it before. It just illustrates the fact that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes on any single decision. And, nothing can really be judged in isolation. It needs to be part of a comprehensive understanding of everything that goes on in a very, very complex process that is aimed at educational excellence, student achievement as a bottom line.
Thank you, sir. Two more follow-ups. One thing I didn't mention is we work with our Freehold regional partners, both the high school district and the sending district, to have some level of compatibility. We recognize we're different districts and there's unique needs there, but stuff like conferences, we kind of let the high school set theirs and then we follow ours to make sure we're not in conflict, because we certainly have parents that have children in the regional high school district as well as here at the K-8. So we work with our partners to try to build some collaborative nature within the development of those calendars. So that is certainly critically important. So I will certainly take the feedback, and I will. This is not. I don't need to win the day with the calendar. I have to have a calendar that fits the needs of the district. So trust me, the feedback that comes back is that we're not serving the community well, and I can create a calendar that serves it better and still meets our objection. I have no problem. You may see a different calendar in April, is what I'm saying. But until I get feedback, I won't know that. So
Very good. And we look forward to seeing the final recommendation.
yeah. So if it's okay with you, sir, I'll move to the rest of the update here.
Because I just wanted to ask one question, because obviously there was a lot of feedback on social media. If people have any concerns, should they just email you directly with that feedback so you can take that into consideration?
A member of this community is always able to email me. I respond, and I don't know if Ms. Gray's still here, but Ms. Stevens and Ms. Gray and the folks in the board will tell you, if I don't respond in 24 hours, and by the way, I missed one recently, and I'm still kicking myself over it, because we had a crazy week. It was the week of the school shooting, actually. But the reality is, anyone can email me about anything. There are certain things I'm privy to talk about. There are certain things that I just won't get into with the public. But certainly, if it's an appropriate question, they'll get a detailed answer and response. But I think the venue for the key stakeholders is their local PTA presidents. This way it's channeled, and there's not 70 different requests. For example, the association will sift through them and not give me duplicate questions, right? So that kind of streamlines it, allows me to be more efficient at getting responses out. So certainly I'm open to receiving emails, I always do. But I think if they work it through the proper channels, I think it would be better served.
And I think that's important to take a lot of people on the process myself. And I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with kind of how the calendar is developed, so I think it's important that the public understands who they can speak to if they have concerns.
Absolutely. No, I mean, Mr. Crowe, that's a good point. The reality is that this particular social media detour was not part of the process. The process was, and I'll just leave it at that, that at the end of the day, the board and the district don't operate on a social media referendum platform. We operate strictly on a process that's designed to seek out the input of stakeholders, which in and of itself is above and beyond what other districts do, but we have a commitment to community interaction. So we go through the representatives of the community, through the PTA, PTOs, and through our stakeholders and our staff and everyone else, which Mr. Isola deliberately pointed out earlier. It's a very detailed, comprehensive process.
And then the two final remarks I'm going to make is community interaction was canceled due to the situation we're dealing with the weather, but that's a big venue for us. It was on our calendar. I'm sorry, it was on our agenda. The calendar was on our agenda. To discuss that, we will have a meeting, Mark, Mr. Bundrani wrote it. I don't know exactly when our next scheduled one is. We have it. But if we have to move it up before the next board meeting, I'm sure you'll, as the chair, see fit to do that. And I'll serve.
17th is right now on the schedule.
And that's the day before the board with the agenda, so that will give the community an opportunity to visit with us that day as well.
And let me close by saying that I understand the concerns of parents, and I share. I think after all of us here are either parents or have been parents of students in the district, and more importantly, we understand that change can always be long. But in this particular case, the process hasn't been completed.
Correct.
And therefore, I think everyone, they can look at this and trust the process. The process will end up with a good outcome, as it has done over many, many years.
And then my final remark will be, and I think I shared some of this with you, this board has charged me to lead with a way that is comfortable with taking risks and doing things a little differently and finding out what works best. To that point, I have looked at innovative solutions to condense the calendar a little bit where possible, and I've spoken with my partners at the HDEA and the HDAC, and we'll see where those conversations go. And if I can come up with any innovative solutions that somehow buy time on one side or the other, but respect the collective unit, the collective bargaining unit contract, I will present to you and ask you for consideration of certain things. If we can't come to a mutual understanding on one side or the other, then I don't need to bother the board with something. But I think there's also creative ways to accomplish some of our calendar's objectives and serve the community well and the staff and students, of course, in the forefront. So if I may move on, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just briefly, the CUSAC. Guess what happened to CUSAC? It was canceled due to weather. So our monitoring process, we're waiting for new dates from the state county office. Once we get those, we'll let the board know when that's happening. We don't have any information other than we're now over-prepared because we have more time to continue to hone the information in and get it ready for our visitors from the county office. But once we have a new date for that monitoring, we'll make sure we share it with the board and the appropriate committees. So proud of this school district. Last year, we had participants compete in the U.S. Army steam tank. It's a version of Shark Tank, but for steam projects. And as you all know, at last year's school boards convention in Atlantic City, we had 3 of our middle school teams compete for the state finalists, and we had one of our team come in 3rd place in the entire state. It was an amazing accomplishment for our first ever run at that. And typical with Howell, that had lit the spark. This year at Central Regional competition, we had 9 teams who made it to the regionals and competed just last week. We had 4 from the middle school, 4 from Newberry, and 1 from Ramtown. Mr. Boris, yeah, I get that right. In Ramtown. And I had a county meeting, so I wasn't there in person, unfortunately, but Ms. Angle and Mr. Boris and so many of our staff went there to support the students in their presentations to the shocks of this steam tank, and we're awaiting those results, and we're optimistic, and hopefully some of our kids will get an opportunity to advance out of the Central Regional and on once again to the state finals, which once again will be down at the school boards conference. So very exciting there. On that same venue, you recently said that Mr. Bundrani, you and I had a conversation about showcasing some of the work that's happening throughout this district, but the efforts that you all support in the school leadership and staff does a great job with every day. Well, here's a perfect opportunity. On the 28th of March, we have our annual Maker Madness Night over at Middle School North. I encourage everyone to be out there. It's just a fun, exciting night that will provide a glimpse into some of the really great projects and thinking that our young students are doing. It's awesome. So I encourage you to take an opportunity to get out to Middle School North. It's from 6 to 8 p.m. on the 28th. Really important 2 events coming up. It's really one event but bifurcated. So we have the 8th grade Girls Night Out and Boys Night Out. The Girls Night Out will be on April 10th, and the boys get their version on April 12th. That is a Tuesday and a Thursday, respectively, from 6 to 8 p.m. The girls will be doing it at Middle School North, and the boys will be doing it at Middle School South. A great night. We bring kids together. We get a captive audience. They do some fun things like yoga. Boys look at video games and things of that nature. But then we also take the opportunity to educate them about some of the issues that young teenagers are dealing with. We'll be talking about the opioid and vaping epidemic that's happening throughout our state. We'll talk about appropriate, making sure that you're not a victim of some kind of uncomfortable dating or any of those types of events. And those flyers have been out. We're hopeful that we can attract many of our middle school students, 8th grade students, because we want them to launch to high school with an understanding of what that looks like. It's a high school readiness type program as well.
What were those dates again?
It's Tuesday, the Girls Night Out is Tuesday, April 10th, and the boys is Thursday, April 12th. We'll make sure I'll email the entire board the flyers. It's Friday, but it would be Monday. We'll get those out to you, and you'll get to see them. This was a program we had done a while ago, and kind of weaned off, and some of the dialogue at this very day had driven me, and some of my partner districts had did some really nice work in this area, and I thought that our kids were certainly worthy of such a program and a chance to get them in the right frame of mind as they get ready for high school. Our foundation is continuing to work diligently to raise funds so that they may support our teachers and students in innovative ways. Their 2 big events, the Evening of the Stars, which is a free event, is scheduled for April 19th. It was rescheduled at Middle School North. And their big fundraiser is the Race to Educate. That's happening right here at Middle School South on the 19th of May. And it's going to be a color run this year. It should be fun and exciting, and we're encouraging all members of our community to get out there. Mr. Preston will hand to you an update on progress towards our district goals, which is also part of the Chief School Administrative Evaluation, so I'll hand this around to you. We'll also, if it's not already in SharePoint, it will be by Monday morning, so you can look at it digitally. One of the updates provides a hyperlink. Again, not going to read to you all of the accomplishments in those 4 goal areas. Many of them you're part of through the committee process. You understand a lot of what's happening, and through the regular updates that you receive, you see those. So we'll be building on that as we get closer to the end of the school year, and we start to tie up some of the loose ends that are necessary for the board to do. Chief School Administrator eval now is part of CUSAC. We've never had this problem, but if it's not done on a timely basis, the district would lose points towards its monitoring process going forward. Again, it's never been a problem. Mr. Miller's been very diligent about keeping us on track with timelines, so I don't anticipate that being a concern, but wanted to share with you that that has now been included as part of CUSAC. During the month of Mr. President will also hand to you this month's report of suspensions, which was 19 either in or out of school suspensions throughout our 12 schools. And that is coming around to you as we speak. And I believe, sir, that concludes my report this evening. And I'd like to thank everyone for their patience. I know we're trying to be respectful of time on a Friday evening, but I thought there was some important information for me to share with you. I wanted to make sure that we, since we've assembled, let's make sure we get our work in.
Thank you, Mr. Solo, for a very thorough report. Appreciate it. All right, Mr. Sanasak, I
Yes.
believe it is time now for committee updates.
I would like to, because we're out of order, I'd like to take the minutes real quick and then committee updates. Just
Of course,
in general,
absolutely.
just the regular meeting, we will suspend the exec minutes because we didn't get a chance to present them in exec until the next meeting.
We'll take them into the next meeting.
If I could have a motion and a second for the minutes.
Second.
Take it around. All in
I'm
favor?
sorry, who's the mover?
I moved.
Ms. Malley
Second.
and Mr. Miller. Thank you. Ms. Malley,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. German,
Yes.
Dr. Love,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangano,
Yes.
Mrs. Okerson,
Yes.
Mr. Thor,
Yes.
Mr. Bongiovanni,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
Yes, the minutes are approved, 9 votes in favor, none opposed. It is now time for, as you said, the committee and liaison reports, sir.
Very good. Okay, thank you. I'll start on my right. Ms. Mangano, as Township Liaison, any updates or reports for us?
There's no updates for that. I wasn't able to attend the March meeting, but the planning board meeting is set for April 5th, so I'll be attending that, and it's on for April 9th.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Although I did note that the issue around one of the issues was postponed, I think, indefinitely the transfer station.
That's
So,
a definite postponement.
Well, we communicated with I believe we communicated with the freeholders about that issue, asking for an impact study. So we did have an outreach on that issue. So hopefully we'll see how that goes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Mr. Miller.
The Finance Committee met last night to discuss the tentative budget to recommend to you this evening, which is on the agenda. Mr. Sanasak discussed the budget process with the committee, presented a PowerPoint to the committee, reported, even though we're going to 2% without debt service being down and everything, we're only looking at an overall 0.58% tax levy, which comes out to about an average home to about $4 for the year. He explained how the tax rate is developed and calculated based on preliminary numbers from the township ratables are approximately $250 million over last year. There was a discussion that March 29th is the final date to file a tentative budget with the executive county superintendent. And the public hearing is set for May 2nd at Middle School North, and that's when the board will adopt the final budget. Mr. Sanasak stated that the state aid came in, even though they had given us a large amount in certain areas, they gave us cuts in others, so we only came out with an increase of $15,375 over last year. The committee voted to recommend this tentative budget. Like I said, the governor's budget address was very optimistic. However, built into his budget is tax relief from a millionaire tax and taxation on legalizing marijuana. Both of these still need to be passed into law. So the committee administration will have to monitor this for any last minute changes to the state aid that could affect the overall budget development. February 15th minutes for the committee were reviewed and approved by the committee. I attended the Middle School North Play recently and submitted to the National Journal, and I look forward to seeing Middle School South play this weekend. I also took part in Read Across America in a couple of our schools, reading to our younger students. And finally, the Monmouth County School Board's 8th grade dialogue is now on April 11th, and we're going to be hosting it outside the community in Richmond Town.
I want to commend the Finance Committee, Mr. Sanasak, and the administrative team for really doing an excellent job of looking for any efficiency we can operationally to allow us to continue to fund our educational program. But this budget, on a total spend at 0.58%, I think is one of the best, closest to flat that we can get, I think, really. And when you consider that, we're looking at an inflationary environment where it's running at 1.5% to 2%, and the fact that we have so many fixed costs within our budget, that we're able to do so just is a hallmark of the fact that we really are focused on educational excellence, but also being as efficient as possible. So I think that's a great testament, and well done. Thank you. And certainly we'll be looking very carefully at how our Trenton government conducts themselves over the next 3 months as we continue this process. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Bongiovanni,
Mr. O'Brien, just a personal privilege for 1 minute.
Sure.
For our fellow board members out there, what you've been listening to is Mr. Rizzola's report, obviously, and now you're hearing the committee reports. When you come to the board office that day, you were told when you were handed your when you were sworn in tonight, what committees you'll be serving on. This is the type of material you'll be working on when you're up there that day, the different committees, finance, education. So this is really the part of the meeting that will affect you the most. So I just want you to know that's what you're seeing now.
It's a good point, Mr. President. Thanks for pointing that out.
Thanks. Community interaction met on March 1st. As always, Mr. Isola gave an update on things that were happening in the district, many of which we heard again tonight. Lieutenant Fowler came out, and it was only a few nights after the large security meeting that we had for the community, but some other members of the community came out. Lieutenant Fowler and Chief Kudrick, knowing that there were going to be people there, he came and he did another presentation in terms of the security issues and the preventative measures we've been taking here in town, not just the school district, but certainly the police department, and reaction to that was really very good. We did come up with a committee calendar, and that's on the website now for that particular committee. The other thing I'll talk about real quickly is that the other night I attended the Board of Directors meeting for New Jersey school boards. A nice piece for us to hear is that the budget for school boards was also discussed, and once again, there will be no increase in dues moving forward to the districts for school boards. They also took a recommendation for a policy change to bring before the delegate assembly, looking at school security, trying to strengthen up their actions in terms of lobbying state legislators on things that can be done and can't be done. In fact, the topic of the fire alarms that has been discussed at this board came up, and they would be very anxious to hear our proposal if we could move forward with that. September 15th is their next meeting. I'm sorry, that's next meeting for us. That was really the main items at that meeting. So I'll pass now.
Thank you. Dr. Love, education.
The Education Committee met on March 5th. We did review the professional learning plan, which is something that's required to be submitted by the county each year, to the county each year. And overall, this year's plan was a shift from the term professional development to personalized learning. That puts us more in line with our education goals, which I'll go over later. The plan outlines the district goals and their intended outcomes, emphasizing the personalized learning. The next steps now are to include our district mentoring plan into the professional development plan. Mr. Isola talked earlier about our pilot with the teacher evaluation program, the Marzano model pilot. The district will pilot the Marzano focused teacher evaluation model for the remainder of the school year. The model improves the accuracy of the observations, focusing on student evidence of attaining standards while simplifying the overall evaluation process. The system allows for more continued feedback to the teacher throughout the year to achieve proficiency. And should the pilot be successful, it will require a minimal transition. We had a really good discussion about that. Ms. Okerson and practitioners who are in the field, so I was really excited about it. I think it's something that will take us to the next step. The Education Committee, we established our goals for 2018, and they are to continue to deepen the deliberate practice that makes personalized learning a reality, explicitly align the Education Committee work to support our strategic plan. And the Education Committee's dates for the remainder of the year, we went to June, April 9th, 5 o'clock, May 14th, 7 p.m., and June 4th, 5 o'clock. So we'll discuss additional dates in May. And Mr. Isola covered the CUSAC situation, so we're going to be extra prepared now that we're ready. And so that's it. And we also, I'm sorry, one last thing, important thing. We did approve the minutes from the February 5th meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Love. Ms. Mallon, operations.
Operations met on March 15th, and we had a couple of issues to discuss. First, with transportation, we have 8 buses, 8 54-passenger buses that are going to be aging out. We're only allowed to keep them on the road for 15 years, and so we have 8 buses that are going to reach that year this year. So we're going to be looking to replace those. And also 2 20-passenger vans we're going to need to replace. The other thing is wanted to add to the fleet 2 wheelchair accessible with built-in car seats, which would then enable us to take back a package, 1 package to the vendor. The committee was in favor to recommend these to the finance committee. The next thing we talked about was district-wide. We do have a shared services agreement with the township for the trash. We're in the 6th year of that. We purchased the truck, and then the township maintains the truck and picks up all of our district trash. So what we wanted to recommend to the finance committee was to add a replacement truck into the budget now. Not that we would need it right yet, but that it would be available if we do need it and we're ready to replace that truck. Also, the discussion for purchasing a multi-purpose transport might be wise, like an SUV type vehicle for various purposes in the district. Again, it's not something that we are going to be purchasing right now, but it's something that we wanted to recommend to the finance committee to include in the budget, and the committee, again, supported that recommendation. Okay, the next thing we talked about, we did an ESIP update. Moving along, we have several bus routing software we're looking at. We didn't have a decision ready at the committee meeting. We were hoping it would be ready and on the agenda this evening. However, Mr. Sanders said it is not ready yet.
Correct. We are still waiting for some information on the one grant that we talked about, so the grant would sway it dramatically one way or the other, and we're hoping for the grant to be approved.
Okay, thank you. So that's still waiting for a final decision. That was it on operations. Then we moved on to safety. And mostly the recommendations that we did for safety are out of the maintenance reserve, capital, and some for the general fund. Basically, we're looking at special area, door hardware, enhancing the messaging technology, and expanding the camera service area. Those are some of the places for safety that we were looking to improve upon. And again, the committee was all in favor to recommend that to the finance committee. Again, to add on, a new security committee is being formed to discuss, to go over our protocols. And then we approved the minutes from the February 13th meeting, and that was it. And my report.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I have asked you to serve as the board liaison to the security task force and safety task force that's being held.
Yes.
So thank you for
Absolutely.
those operations, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, those purchases of equipment and everything else are part of that long-range planning, because at the end of the day, that's one of the reasons why we maintain the integrity of our programs and our infrastructure is by being able to spread the costs out over time, looking ahead, and being proactive, both with development of reserves and when we actually make purchases. So that's something that this board has developed over the last 5 or 10 years, is that strategic long-term view as opposed to a year-to-year, which was in the past practice always very difficult for administration to plan effectively, because they would have to change their budget assumptions each year based on a very little state aid. But now we're able to get ahead of the curve and be proactive in planning ahead for lean time so that we continue to maintain our educational programs and the safety and security of our kids, even when we have trouble in training. So, thank you for that. Okay. Turning over to Stephen of Trenton, and we have a legislative report. We also have a policy. Mr. German, policy.
I'll begin with, if you don't mind, with the policy report. There are a number of policies that are up for consideration, policies and regulations tonight. A general comment. Many of them are changes in words to update the language in our policies and regulations to reflect changes in law and particularly in the administrative code. But many of them do not in any fundamental way change our policies. So you have to look at many of them with all the details, but many of them are just to update things. The first one is the introduction bylaw, which of course has the general definitions that pertain to all policies and regulations. They update the fact that DIFAS is no longer having that name, becoming the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. We get rid of the words New Jersey Core Curriculum Content Standards to New Jersey Student Learning Standards, which is the current term. There are a couple of other changes with County Superintendent, the United States Code, but essentially there's no change there, but it would apply to any reference in any of the policies or regulations we have. We have policy and regulation 1240, which deals with the evaluation of the superintendent. This changes one thing. It removes the word written that is in the current policy from annual written performance report to an annual performance report. It in no way changes or alters any policy or practice involving the development of policy, how we evaluate the superintendent or storage of annual performance reports. So again, that's an update. And then we also have policy and regulation 3160 about physical examinations. There are two standards, there are two separate policies, two separate regulations, one for teachers, one for other staff, but they are parallel, they say the same thing. And here, there are a couple of changes. The current policy says that any candidate for employment may be required to undergo a physical examination, and it required a physical examination for newly employed staff. The change is now, and it's an important revision, it now requires a physical examination for candidates for employment who have received a conditional offer of employment. So they first have to have that testing, and it indicates that this would allow the district to notify a candidate for employment who receives a conditional offer of employment that an offer can be rescinded by the superintendent or board if the candidate is unable to perform reasonable accommodations according to the Americans with Disabilities Act. Again, we have to conform to the state law, so we're updating it. Policy 3437 and 4437 have to do with military leave. And again, this is updating. This is for people, employees, and their salaries when they're serving active duty in a branch of the federal or state military. And the reality is this is an update according to changes in statutes and the like.
Right. But it doesn't change the intent of our policy. It's been very supportive of those.
Right. It's totally in support. There's nothing right. I mean, I could go into details, but it really doesn't in any way affect it. Now, the next proposed policy, 55.16.01, is student tracking devices. This is a new policy for our district. And apparently, part of what prompted this is that there are a number of parents, particularly young children, who have special needs children, who want to monitor what's going on to help their children, going to school and once they're in school. But it is worded in such a way that it provides that a device that the regulation or proposal here is that students would be able to have these devices on school buses or on school grounds. Even if they enable the recording and or transmitting of audio and or video communication, because that's the idea. It's either tape or provides one-way or two-way audio and or video communications. But, so they were allowed to possess it, they're allowed to have it with them. What it does provide is that it's a violation of student privacy rights governed by the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act and the New Jersey Administrative Code to have a third person listen in to the device, so they can't have it on. Or the idea is it develops, it is a tracking device, but it prohibits the recording or transmission of audio or video. That's the point. Because of the privacy rights of other students and personnel.
Also, security-wise, I mean, with cyber hacking and everything else, you really don't want to have that type of technology available that could be hacked by a malevolent entity as well, right? So, how are they limiting it? Their policy is just that it's not permitted, right?
And this would go into the violation of the student code of conduct, and it's again made known to the parents as well. So,
21st century policy.
Sorry. So because these kids are not allowed to have these tracking devices on the audio and video, you're saying?
They're not allowed to use, yes, they're not, because other persons, privacy rights are violated, and according to the standards that are in place, and as Mr. Ryan said, there are other reasons why they would be concerned.
But they can be used for GPS tracking,
Yes.
just not for audio and visual. So the original intent, which is to allow parents to have an idea of where their children are and the location services for their safety, would be still applied. Just the other issues present a problem, which need to be restricted. Okay.
The next policy is 8507, which has to do with our breakfast program, breakfast offer versus serve program. And this is to reflect changes in the New Jersey Department of Agriculture's administrative review about recommending additional language. Again, although there's language in there, it in essence keeps the program the way it's in place. Students having who are under the program, they have the choice of the 4 different types of food, and they have to take 3 on their plate. So although the wording has changed, it doesn't really in any way reflect any change in how we would administer the program. Okay. The next policy, 2700, which is services to non-public school students, that's been done to incorporate revisions in the administrative code. But once again, there's nothing in the new code policy that's being proposed here that requires new or additional responsibilities for this district in regard to non-public schools. So again, there are various services that we can provide with special education, English as a second language, textbooks, nursing, transportation. I mean, they all are in place. The language here is just update the references in the administrative code. And the final policy, 7300, that's here, disposition of property. Disposition of property has been reviewed and revised to incorporate minor revisions in the administrative code that have been adopted over the previous years. Apparently, the most important change provides clarification of the district procedure to dispose of scrap or waste school district matter after there are no bids for property after a public or private sale. But again, that's just to reflect what's in place. So that's the policy report.
Thanks.
Okay. Before I take a moment, if I can mention one other thing that I participated in, and that was Read Across America. And I was able to go to LOP, to Taunton, and to Gribling. And it was the most magnificent experience. And I bring it up for this reason. I had an opportunity, as we all do, to meet with kindergarten students and second grade students in each of these schools. So a lot of classes. And it was remarkable. So it was Read Across America, a lot of emphasis on Dr. Seuss. I have to tell you, every time we go into the schools, it just tells me what wonderful things are taking place. I found in every single instance, students, kindergarten students, second grade students, engaged, involved, informed, interested, enjoying the experience, and following it so attentively for a prolonged period of time, and engaging as they do in communication and interaction. So one thing I loved, for instance, was, and again, I know it goes on in different schools, the students from Aldrich, the older students came to read the students in and that was fantastic to watch that experience. I must tell you, one question I asked, because I basically made it an interactive thing. I asked students, these are kindergarten, second grade students actually, so what do you find is important or valuable about reading? And I had heard about 5 or 6 different students explain to me what's great about reading. And I have to tell you, I've talked to adults about reading, and honestly, the quality of those comments were amazing, and their understanding of this. So what we have in this district is tremendous appreciation of making life learning interesting, creative, interactive. We have such a rich curriculum, even in talking to them, whether we were talking about rhyming and poetry and language, whether we were talking about geography, whether we were talking about science, it was easy to get into that. They were just back and forth, just constantly interactive. And it just reflects the kind of, schools, the rich curriculum, the outstanding teachers we have in this district, and the work that they do. and with the administrators, the principals, our superintendent, and administrative staff. So I have to tell you, that's where the whole price of admission is. Okay?
And what we're here for anyway.
Yes, and that's what we're here for. So that's exciting. So I'll take a little time on that.
Thanks for sharing.
On advocacy committee, we had our first advocacy committee of the year, when we basically came up with committee goals, basically to actually come up with ideas of bills that we either oppose or support that were already in the legislative hopper. Also, at times, as we all understand, to suggest or various pieces of legislation, potential legislation, or become advocates. That's the whole idea of legislative advocates. And of course, to report to the board on topics, on ongoing issues and ideas when things come up. There were a number of bills that we talked about. I made this, if you don't mind, just focus on 3 of them for tonight. One had to do with the possibility of looking at additional funding for safety grants. We talked about the cap we have, the 2% cap. So one of the discussion items we had was to perhaps look at to see whether we could get additional support from the state to allow funding and expenses for security measures to be extended beyond the cap, so that we might be able to do something there. And as I understand it, that is to be discussed in conjunction with the Safety Task Force and Finance Committees. So since our meeting of that committee, it's taking hold in a lot of other areas. All right?
Absolutely.
Second point Mr. O'Brien mentioned was the point about the late fire evacuation. Again, that's because of great concern for security and whether or not and when the fire alarms have to be hit. And again, it's been discussion, and I know there was extensive discussion in our meetings, with parents from the middle school about what is best for the safety of the children. So that's something that we really want to pursue a little more. And as I understand it, that too is going to be discussed in conjunction with the safety committee. Okay. To go to one other point, which again Mr. O'Brien mentioned, and that is our advocacy to redo the ESSA requirement, the testing requirement. Right now, what we are suggesting, and again this needs a lot more discussion, is that testing be done, let's say, at the 4th grade level, the 8th grade level, and 11th grade level across the board. But if students are in good standing, and frankly, the way our schools show up and perform, this would be the case. That we would like to see that some of the additional testing not be there. And again, that's where we'd be going to a lot of reasons for it, and I know administration is working on that, we're putting together.
Right. Because we want to focus on education, not just on statewide assessment. We need to do that. There's a value and a place for a statewide assessment, but it has to be in the right order and balance to allow us to continue to focus on actual education. And the time spent on the testing process is drained in some cases away from our educational efforts.
And I think the point can be made, and I know I've been on board years ago, and this is what I learned it then, that you can do a very fine assessment with the 3 grade levels. That's the point, isn't it? If we couldn't do that, then we'd be concerned, but we can, and then it's just right.
It's all about the right balance. And I believe we've gone too far in one way, and by bringing it back, we can get better focused on what we're really capable of. Yes.
If that concludes committee briefs, I have one other thing.
Yeah, Mr. Gurman, anything else for us from policy?
No.
Did you have something to talk about?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that'd be a great topic to discuss in education, flesh those ideas out.
Yeah, we're working on a draft. We can share that with both advocacy and education, and then they can talk about that at the next meeting.
Flesh it out.
It's not going to be an impact for this school year anyway, so let's get it right, and let's get the letter out as quickly as possible, but certainly with the right information.
Absolutely, thank you. Again, a key word here is collaboration.
It's all right, I apologize.
Yes,
I know
I do want to take the business portion of the meeting as quickly as possible because I know folks have some important engagement to get to. So
absolutely, and we'll only need a quorum in exec for the one topic.
Right.
So if that could, as long as
we can excuse certain board members.
yeah, as long as that agrees. Fortunately, we have 4 more students to recognize tonight. I'm a little mixed up with the song, but they came here tonight, and I know that this board takes great pride.
It's absolutely important that we
If
recognize.
we just ask 2 folks to join us.
Absolutely, I would ask again.
We had both of our middle schools participate in the Donovan Catholic Olympics, academic Olympics, and we killed it, and you'll hear a lot about this in April. But we have a couple of our
Oh,
students.
I thought this was Board of Ed, so.
No, we have some of our students that came out tonight, and I just think it appropriate that
Then I
we
think Ms.
take.
Miller should also be joined by Dr. Lowe.
Sure, yeah.
No, come on, all three of you.
Three's company. Three's company.
So, wonderful, thank you. March 13th, we had many of our Project Plus students went out and had the opportunity to compete scholastically in the Scholastic Olympics there. Something, I think about 17 students overall were walked away with medals. 4 of those students are here tonight, so we'd like to recognize you. So first from North, we have Milian Inko, who took bronze in technology. From South, we have Brian Askin, who took bronze in science. Also South, Samuel Rodriguez, who took bronze in math. Last but not least, and certainly not for tonight, Richie Shen took bronze for spelling for South as well.
Congratulations.
Small but prideful sample of the wonderful things that are occurring.
Absolutely, it's always great. We'll always take time to recognize our students and their achievements. If you folks want to jump in with the board members and for a photo.
We got one more. And we have Dante, the gold medal. We apologize, we thought we pushed these to April, so our apologies. And you're welcome to come back in April, we'll do it again.
Do we have one more?
Dante.
Dante South?
With Dante, please approach the podium.
We got it.
I'm catching up to all you. Dante took gold for science, as you've all heard. So thank you.
Great book. Enjoyed that.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize about that. You sure? Great job. Great job.
Friday night, if we could take the agenda and the consent agenda and the addenda this evening so that they can go about that, we can finish the meeting after that. So,
Absolutely.
so we have a mover and a second for the consent of the addenda.
Ms. Malley,
Moved by Ms. Malley,
we have second by Mr. Thor.
second by Mr. Thor. May I take that around,
Please
sir?
do.
Mrs. Malley?
Yes.
Mr. Thor?
Yes.
Mr. Gurman?
Yes, I'm staying on 3000-3.
Thank you. Dr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mrs. Mangano? Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Okerson?
Yes.
Mr. Bongiovanni?
Yes, abstain on 2014 and 15.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
The consent agenda and the addenda are approved. 9 votes in favor, none opposed, with the abstentions noted for the record. Thank you for that. I know people that have other commitments need to leave the dais.
Yes, if any board member does, as long as we can maintain a quorum, I would appreciate it. So those board members who have a need to be somewhere else, raise your hands. I know there's 1, 2, 3. Does that leave us a quorum?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
As
great.
long as nobody else runs out.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. May I move into public comment while we're
While we're doing that, by the way, folks, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing our fellow board members at the Student Board Day. And thank you. Congratulations again to all the student achievers who came out tonight and were recognized. Thank you. Get home safe. Okay, now,
I'll be in touch with you. I'll come out to your school and see you, and congratulations. All right? Thank you. Thank you. next month.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Okay, as we are adjusting the room here a little bit, it is time for the first public comment. May I take that, sir?
Please do.
Whereas the Howell Township Board of Education determines comments from the public may last 45 minutes, and those comments will be conducted in accordance with its bylaw 0164.1. Individuals may be limited to 3 minutes each. It is now time for that public comment. The officer, with respect to time and decorum, will be the President of the Board, Mr. Timothy O'Brien. May the floor be open, sir.
Please.
Are there comments from the public at this time?
Seeing none. Oh, wait, we have one? Okay, very good. You guys give us your name and address, please?
My name is Mark Parisi. I live in 2 Catholic Court.
Welcome.
Thank you for having this meeting, opening up for public comment. I wanted to say that when you were mentioning earlier that about some other municipal meetings, I went to the town council's budget meeting on Tuesday, and since we were talking about budget tonight with the Board of Ed, that there was no discussion about the municipal budget, but I want to add to the board that the Councilman Walsh did move to introduce a budget that had a $2.5 million increase in spending, and it was after some delay, the mayor did second the motion to introduce that budget, but it was voted down 3-1. So they did move to introduce the budget, but it was not put forward. So I just wanted to share that with the board.
Thank you. And appreciate that. We wish them luck on their budget process, and hopefully they can resolve it. Thank you, sir, for that.
Any further comments? Seeing none, sir, and before we close?
Please. And I guess we have a second public comment?
Well, unless there's any discussion in between, but if there's not, we can move to the second public comment.
Do you have any discussion? I believe none, right? Seeing
It's now
none?
time for the second public comment, and I will not repeat it. The same
You may open the
motion that
floor.
applies.
Yes.
The officer with respect to time and decorum, Mr. O'Brien, may the floor be open.
Please,
Further comments at this time? Seeing none?
close the floor.
Close the floor. The board is in need of a brief executive session. The only topic this evening is the HIP report. Please note the motion printed in the agenda. We will not be returning to business, so
Right.
we can adjourn from executive session, if
Very
that
good.
is the pleasure.
I believe we have consent on that. We're good?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to convene to executive. This concludes our public meeting, and we will adjourn from executive. Thank you, everybody. Get home safe. We appreciate you coming out tonight.